Okay, welcome to a special edition of News from the Roots. Today is Saturday, June 16th, and we have three special guests in the studio this afternoon actually. Dan Kowal, Selma Sparks, Lucy Christopher, and all of us are involved in the Jackson County NAACP. And Dan and Lucy just came back from Raleigh a few days ago, having been arrested in a moment of civil disobedience or a series that has been taking place in Raleigh. Let's start with you, Dan. What was the occasion? Why did so many people? How many people were there who were arrested, and why were you arrested? What was the cause?
Well, this was part of the Poor People's Campaign that Dr. King started over 50 years ago, and Dr. Barber has since picked it up along with Reverend Theo Harris on a national level. And so it started on Mother's Day. It's been gone for 40 days, and this coming Monday is the last Monday of June. It's going to be the last day. There are at least 34 people arrested in Raleigh at the State Capitol building. There was quite a big contingent from Western North Carolina, specifically from Haywood County, but two of us from the Jackson County.
Three of us from
Jackson County came out and joined and decided that it is important enough that we've got way too many people living in poverty and not able to earn, even working full time, still living in poverty, which is just crazy. About 40% of the U.S. population is living in poverty. In the wealthiest nation in the world, that's just insane. And so the focus this week was Fight for 15, a livable wage, the right to unionize, and working conditions. And so, yes.
And the government support programs for people in poverty. Diminishing government support programs.
Definitely. In fact, our politicians' decision to cut services to the poor as they increase tax refunds to the wealthiest in the state.
So, Lucy, what possessed you to participate in this specifically? Now, why now and this time?
Well, because I think Dr. Barber has really, and Liz Theo Harris have pulled it all together. This is sort of the most basic thing. The poverty is impacted by all of these issues that I care about. I bet every one of us sitting here cares about. That was a large part of it. I also had the looming prospect of my aging body, and thought I better get my foot in there. I want to do this at some point, and every year I wait, it'll be harder. So I'm going ahead, and I even had the blessings of my 89-year-old husband to do it, and that was very important, very important.
And who was the third person from Jackson County?
Lynn Bissett.
Okay.
Lindsay Bissett.
Okay. And Selma, you weren't there this time, but you've been involved in political action and activism for your entire life as well.
Yes.
And for those who don't know, Selma Sparks is a legendary journalist from New York City, originally, who was the only woman ever to granted permission to interview Malcolm X.
Yes, I understand it was at his request.
And you have participated in civil disobedience in the past as well.
Yes.
And just so to place that historically, if you'll tell us.
I'm trying to remember the year, but this was during the Vietnam War. And this was against the atomic bomb. This was the energy, yes, this was quite, it must have been the 60s, early 60s.
At least. or
Yes,
not
yes.
earlier.
Mhm.
Ban the bomb.
And Women's Strike for Peace was very active at that point. And they asked me, I joined up with them. And the police came to arrest. You know, in New York at that time, this is what they did. They arrested you, and that was it. And we were all arrested. I was arrested. I was handled a little differently because my whole attitude was very different. And I don't know if I should even go through that, actually. You know, I was the only, I think, yes, I was the only African-American woman in the group that day. And the other women fell down on the ground when the cops came to arrest them. And I looked at them, I thought they were crazy. I couldn't understand what they were doing. And I looked at the cops and I said to them, if you want me in that's the paddy wagon that they're going to put everybody in. So if you want me in that, you have to pick me up like a Dresden china doll and set me down. And I looked at the women on the ground, and the cops looked at me and they lifted me up gently and set me down. When we got to the police station, they lifted me gently out. And the other women, they just dragged them, you know, because they weren't getting up, and they dragged them, and I told them,
Boy, you got it.
I told them that, you know, why do that? You don't have to be handled that way. And that was it. And I think after that, that didn't happen again. It didn't happen again.
And to legitimize my own presence in this conversation, I'll have to say that I have as well been arrested in the past 3 times actually for civil disobedience. Not yet for the Poor People's Campaign, although I don't eliminate that as a possibility in the near future, but I have been arrested twice, once in 1979 for shutting down a nuclear power plant in Portland, Oregon, and twice for attempting to prevent the construction of the Cliffside coal-burning power plant in Rutherford County here in North Carolina. So what is it about civil disobedience? Why do we participate in civil disobedience? Why do we find it necessary to get arrested?
I'll start if that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've petitioned, we've organized, we've canvassed, we've marched, we've talked, we've called, we've listened, we've begged, we've written, we've pleaded, and our North Carolina politicians just turn a deaf ear toward us. And it's, you know, for me, it's about letting them know that I'm serious. You know, I'm not going to ever do anything violent or whatnot, but just say, look, this is, you know, I'm willing to give up my freedom for a time if this gets your attention, because people are dying from this. And you need to know that this is serious. This is not just some kind of game that you play with your lobbyists and nobody gets hurt. No, real people are dying every day. And I just can't sit by the sidelines year after year and just say, well, I tried.
Right.
It was interesting when they arrested us, we were asked to cease doing what we were doing, which was we were singing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one I was singing was something about I will not be moved or I will not be silent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept singing that. And so they put the armbands on.
They did cuff you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yes.
And to be clear,
Plastic.
for our viewing audience, you know, fortunately, the police were very professional in this case. There was no violence.
Well, the cameras were right on them.
And the cameras were right on,
they
but
are
that
used to
hasn't
it.
necessarily
They're used to it.
stopped police violence in the past.
No,
But when you do this, there is no guarantee that you are not going to feel physical harm from the police. There's no guarantee of what's going to happen when they take you away from the cameras, because they put you in a paddy wagon and take you off someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are doing this are willing to sacrifice their bodies, and they're taking a very real risk. This is no small matter when you put yourselves in the hands of the police. Fortunately, no physical harm came to you and the others this time. There's no guarantee that next time it will work out the same way. So let's not take it lightly. You know, I've had people. No, certainly you're not. I'm saying to our viewing audience that you may have seen civil disobedience that took place in the 60s and during the civil rights movement, in which people were clubbed and gassed and
Posed.
and
Killed by
shot
dogs.
Yes.
and sick by dogs and had water cannons on them. And even though that didn't happen in Raleigh, you don't know when you decide to participate in this whether that's going to happen again. Because if all you have to do is look at Standing Rock and what happened in 2016 to see that the police are still thoroughly capable of the same tactics that were used in the 60s today. It's just a matter of what orders they're given by the people who are in charge, you know. So this is a matter that's very serious, and the more people who have participated, the more threatening it becomes to the establishment, then the more the tactics tend to change. And so what you did was extremely brave and self-sacrificial. But again, the question arises: why is civil disobedience? Why does it take civil disobedience to gain attention? Because that seems to be the case. The news media will ignore us if we're just outside chanting, but when we decide to get arrested, suddenly it hits the front.
It becomes
pages.
real.
Yes.
It becomes real to them. Then they say, "Oh, they must be serious." And as I said, I haven't participated in this at my age and health. I cannot, but I can speak up
You
about
really
it.
can't.
No, I can't do it now. But I'm saying that this is what, it's too bad that in our society today it takes that kind of action.
Yes.
And it does, because as Dan says, we've marched, we've talked, we've done everything. This is all that's left. And it seems to frighten them so, because to recognize these people are serious, to them this is a threat. And this is why, you don't know what they might do.
And that's an important. What you just said is so important for people who say, "Well, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm powerless. I really can't do anything." The people who are in power are aware of your power, of our power, and when they see the depth of commitment that is displayed when you're willing to put your body on the line in that matter, it frightens them.
I think there was a different, it may not have been observable to the public or the cameras or even to us, but I sensed that just the fact that there were 3 times more of us this week than there had been the 4 weeks before,
Yes.
that the police were not prepared, and their response to us may have been, I don't know how to say it was different, but I think we caught their attention more just by the number, and that is a powerful thing. They're hoping for an even larger number next Monday, which will be the final week of the 40 days of action.
But and this is something you talked about before we got together, and hopefully you'll say more, but it is initially fundamentally scary to not be in control of anything. I mean, putting yourself in police custody, it's like, do I sit? Do I stand? Can I use the restroom? Well, there's a restroom in a room the size of this little room, an office, and there's the toilet, and everybody can see you. And it's, you sit here, you do this, you do that.
Was that in the men's situation?
Yes.
Okay. It was different for women.
Okay.
Oh.
Lucky yes.
I thought it was going to be a whole cell full of people in one toilet. It was the
That's
unknown.
what it's like in the men's.
The
for
unknown,
men,
yeah. But you're used to open bathrooms.
Not
When you say
toilet.
you, it depends on who you're talking
men,
to.
men
Yeah.
who have been in.
Yeah.
I mean, but men's rooms are more open than women's.
Well, but there's a
Yes.
private stall for the toilet.
Right.
But there was no private stall for the
Right.
toilet.
Right.
And and it even
I
said,
remember wearing a long shirt. For
Yeah.
that reason, I was
Yeah.
scared.
Well, when I was arrested one time in Charlotte, they arrested us and they put us in together with a gang.
oh, wow.
A black gang,
Mhm.
a street gang of young kids, and we got along great. It was,
Right.
But they did that to intimidate us. We were mostly white. There were some black people among us too, but we were mostly white people of my age and younger, and I think they did that to intimidate us. And as it turned out, we got along fine with everybody, you know. But it was very interesting to see the dynamics, and they moved us around a lot. There was a lot of intimidation in the process, even though we didn't feel physical harm from it. But the potential was always there, and they wanted us to know that you're not getting a free ride. You know that you are in danger. You know?
Well, I
Yeah.
also chose to do civil disobedience as part of the Moral Mondays in 2013, and this was different. In 2013, they also, I guess just for the exercise of it, put us into leg chains, you know, like handcuffs on your legs, and so we all had to walk in step.
Really?
Didn't do that this time, but this time they were a little more invasive about the searches and the hands going in every which, and I was just like, how many times do we have to do this?
3. We did it 3 times.
And then they take you into a room, it's just 2 cops and you, for the guys, I don't know. And okay, we'll do this. And, you know, it's like nobody can see me. Anything
I
could
expected
happen.
to be stripped in that room.
Yeah,
It wasn't.
I mean, anything can happen, and it's just.
Yeah, it's your word against theirs. Right?
Yeah.
They can say,
And
well, he tried to attack us. you
And
know,
who
we beat
are
him
they
up.
going to believe? So,
Right.
and I'm like a privileged white guy, you know, but still, it doesn't matter when you're in jail and, you know, they're law enforcement or whatnot, and we're not, and it's just like, wow, this is, yeah, it's
But
intense.
you know,
I asked to go to the bathroom, and in that first holding room we were in, which was one of the cafeteria rooms in the downstairs of the General Assembly's cafeteria.
Oh, okay.
And they said, well, you're going to have to wait till this group goes out to the paddy wagon. And then this woman and I walked down the hall, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? And so she opened the stall door, and I walked in, and I said, well, I guess you're going to have to pull my pants down.
Oh,
And
because
I
your
turned
hands
to-
were.
My hands were shackled.
Okay.
And we didn't have those off the whole time we were there.
Wow.
For all the, I don't know if you had them off, but
Ridiculous,
we never had them off.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
we were a pretty dangerous
But
crowd.
just- I
Those women, look out.
I turned to her, and she came toward me with a pair of scissors, and she said, now I'm going to be able to trust you, right? And I said, yes. And she cut them off and closed the door behind me, and then put them back on. And she said, now you're going to let me, I can trust you, put these back on. And I said, yes. But I had been looking at her from a distance, and I thought she looked very cold, but she looked at me, and her eyes were very soft and kind. That was.
she saw no
that was-
reason to
It was
intimidate
the individual contact that we had with the policeman that was very positive, wasn't it, Dan?
For the most part, I had a couple.
Well, one of the women who searched me, I just thought that was really untoward, and everybody was behind me, and was going up and everything, you know. But it wasn't strip searching. I mean, they weren't searching for drugs in hidden places and things like that. It was that part, except for the waiting, and on me, the noise level became overwhelming. In fact, at our meeting this morning, I had to walk out because the noise level was so tremendous. It still gets me. I just start shaking all over, and it's like it's inside of me instead of out there.
Well, of course, there are demonstrations that have been taking place, I guess, almost on a daily basis all over the country right now, connected with Wood People's campaign, and in Washington D.C.
40 states
Reverend,
have, and some have 7 cities, you know, like California.
right, and Reverend Barber was arrested along with a number of other clergymen and women, and apparently they were not treated so well.
That was in D.C. He was also
Yeah.
arrested in Kentucky.
They actually
Removed
brought
their
them into the
robes
courtroom in shackles. is what I heard. And they,
These very dangerous people.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
my.
The,
Yeah.
Reverend Barber can barely walk
that's right.
Yeah.
on his own
Or stand
with a
still.
cane,
Right.
but they're going to shackle him because he might.
You might run, right?
Well,
Wow.
they're doing a symbolic thing just like we are.
No, yeah.
They're doing a what?
That's a symbolic thing.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
it's more than symbolic. They're
No,
trying
it's-
to intimidate people.
Oh,
and,
yes.
and they're
Oh,
trying
yes.
to say, this is what's going to happen if you continue doing this, and it's going to get worse. You know?
And to say that if
Yeah.
we're doing this to ministers,
Mhm.
just think what we'll do to you. You know, this is it, because
That's right.
your attitude is, well, if they're doing it to them, I'm a little and they are probably accomplishing that.
Well,
And I say, people,
well, you mean they're intimidating people?
yes,
I don't. I think the opposite. I think
And
it's going to create a
Oh, yeah.
reaction. when
That's
people
what I
think
would
see
so,
hope.
it.
too. I think
Yeah.
that's part of civil disobedience, that when you allow yourself to be taken over, then that makes the state look that much more
Right.
unjust.
unjust,
Brutal and
unjust,
unjust.
Yeah.
yes.
And
Depending on how
I know my own reaction when I heard about that was it really pissed me off. I mean, I said, "Oh, wow, I'm going to get more involved now," because I mean, we all know who Reverend Barber is. He's
Yes.
symbolically, you know, he's like our Martin Luther King Jr. today. you know.
Yes, yes.
And for them to do that in the nation's
Humiliate.
capital is horrific, and the symbolism of that is powerful, and I think they made a big mistake by doing that.
The thing that occurred to me too was, if we've got, we had 34 or maybe a few more arrested this past Monday, and I think of all the thousands, tens of thousands of poor black folks and other folks across the
White
South
folks.
during the Civil Rights Movement,
Totally.
and I think, and they didn't have a nice facility and a professional
No.
staff with cameras recording everything. Those folks were brutalized. We had it easy.
Oh, yes.
I mean, like,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
so far, I mean, ask
Yes.
me to go to do this in rural Mississippi, Alabama, or even Georgia, and I don't know if I'd be signed up for that quite so quickly, because again, you've got some hostility, and
Right.
who knows what happens
And
behind
less-
locked doors.
Less sophisticated criminal justice systems and police that are more racist even, and that's right. Let's talk a little bit more about the issues that were involved and in the Poor People's Campaign. And what is the agenda of the Poor People's Campaign?
Dignity, respect, a way to live with dignity, a living wage,
Right to a
health,
home,
what's
right to an education.
health care, affordable health care.
This week they'd say a right to live.
Yes.
Exactly, a right to live, because that's what it's all about. And this is I think the biggest issue, because this is what creates the crime in in these neighborhoods that they talk about. It's the lack of, and it's the inability to live and make you feel that you don't have a right to live.
Or any hope of getting
That's-
beyond where you
That's
are.
it.
There's actually a process, it seems to me, of criminalizing poverty.
Oh, definitely.
Right
Yes,
now,
yes.
which is just absolutely
That has been
frightening.
underway
It's
for
like
some time.
if you're poor, you must be doing something
Something wrong.
wrong,
something
illegal,
bad.
immoral, bad, and people are being made to feel that way more and more.
Well, we went from the war on poverty to the war on the poor, in 50 years.
Exactly. And I know growing up in New York City and growing up in Harlem, and in the later years seeing this. Now they picked the people who were the poorest, and when Puerto Ricans moved into the area, they were part of it. And this was the thing, the war was against them, and these were the poor people who had no power. And they were going to make certain that they didn't get power. And this is what was done. The children were made to grow up feeling that I'm nothing. And, that's something that creates that creates criminals. And this, of course, was done deliberately also. The jails are filled with these people, and this is why. And this is why they're building more and more jails. And it's because the determination is we can get rid of these people who might cause us trouble if we put them away. And this is what's being done. And
Well, and now the prisons are owned by corporations.
Yes,
It's no
that's the
longer
other
private
thing.
or
Yes.
state-owned. They're owned by a private interest,
So,
which
yeah, they
is
want to
they
fill
are the
every
people
bed.
who are getting wealthy
yes.
off of those in prison.
and the people they put in there to work, oh, this is a whole other story. I mean, there just are no rules. They can do whatever they please and get away with it. So when a black male in New York City is arrested today, he doesn't know what's going to happen to him. And I'm sure it's the same all over the country. You know, if a poor male, black or white, is arrested, he doesn't know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
He has no idea what might happen to him while he's in there. He better not make a wrong move, like raise his hand to scratch his head. Be careful. It's become frightening.
Well, and we've talked about the healthcare issue, and I mean, if you're making what $7.50 an hour, which is still above the minimum wage, what can you afford on $7.50 an hour? You can't afford to pay for housing and car insurance and gasoline and food, and heaven forbid you have a medical issue, you need some medicine, and
The legislature's disallowed Medicaid expansion in our state.
this is absolutely immoral. I mean, if you're working a full-time job in the United States in 2018, the minimum wage ought to be enough to live on. Otherwise, what's the incentive to work?
Exactly. That's the thing. They're saying, they don't want to work. Why working? I've talked to some people who are holding down 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They're working almost around the clock just to survive. And you look back, some of the young people look at that and say, why bother?
Well, yeah, I mean...
And I would say, why bother? It's not getting me anything. It's
very true, and it seems like everything is geared in that way right now, that, they're cutting funds for education. Well, if you've cut funds for education, and instead you put money into prisons, private prisons, you're guaranteeing that you're going to have a population of people living in the prisons. And isn't it shameful that the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the world, has the largest percentage of its population in jail than any other country in the world? More than China, more than North Korea, more than several, every
more
South
than
American
Cuba,
and African
more than,
country.
yes.
Land of the free, huh?
Right. Right.
You're free to starve.
It's extremely Orwellian, isn't it? I mean, land of the free, and we've incarcerated more people than a larger percentage of our population than any other country.
And with health care, this is the only country where, as a senior citizen, I have to really be very concerned about getting treatment. It's reaching the point in this country where you not only have to be wealthy, you have to be extremely wealthy to afford to be healthy.
It's like we said, not only are they criminalizing poverty, they're criminalizing old age.
Oh, definitely. Once you're no longer part of the working force, you're supposed to disappear.
Yeah.
We don't want to be bothered with you. And that's getting worse. I'm feeling it, yes.
It's the dehumanization of our country and our world. It's human beings are no longer the most important factor. It's profit for corporations that are
Third quarter earnings. What's going on with that? That's what's most important.
And politicians are doing the bidding of these corporations.
So they can get reelected.
So they can.
More
Well,
assistance.
I think it's even deeper.
It's
Not
even
only,
deeper than
I mean, I think politicians are owned by corporations right now. For the most part, you're owned
Campaign
by
contributions.
ExxonMobil or
That's how they get
MediaCom
reelected.
or the big banks. I mean, that's what's happening. That's who they're representing, and the needs of people are being forgotten very deliberately. It seems. So, you know, I think if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, that's the fight he would be fighting. It would be against corporate rule, which is taking us back to the days of segregation. They've found ways around the laws to, you know,
resegregate
private
the schools.
Yes. Yes.
And so this is what the Poor People's Campaign is about, and the revival of King's dream.
Well, Dr. King talked
It's
about
the
the three
third
evils.
Reconstruction.
The third Reconstruction.
Providing the third period of
Talk about that.
Reconstruction.
Have you read that?
No, each of us was given a copy when we came out the other night.
Really?
Yes.
By who?
By the welcoming committee and
Of
the people
the Poor
who
People's Campaign.
for
Okay.
the Poor People's Campaign. Yes.
I
yes.
want a copy of that.
We,
yes.
The third Reconstruction.
After the second Reconstruction came Jim Crow, and we're now living in the period of the third Reconstruction, and that's what our movement is about. We're fighting Jim Crow all over again.
But it's not.
It's different,
But it's not just. It's not only against black folks.
No.
Oh, no,
I mean,
no.
Latino folk, white folks, everybody.
It's everyone who's poor.
Yes.
It's the 1% against the 99, and they have drawn this out. They have really got this thing working in their favor. But the only way to break it is through the people coming together across whatever artificial division lines they want to try to create between us. But the only way to fight this thing is for us to work together.
Yeah.
You know, it's what's good for black folks is good for poor white folks.
Exactly.
We're talking about, health care and good schools and living wages and good housing. This is good for everybody.
You know, what harms this black worker harms the white worker. I mean, this was true when we tried for unions, and when unions became a little less oriented. You know, this is said to them, look, if you white workers don't understand that you have to join with the other workers because they're coming after you next.
That's right.
And this happened.
And there's that deliberate policy of driving a wedge in between black and white and Hispanic.
and
The whole
Asian.
immigrant issue, what's happening to immigrants.
And it's always
It's
the
irrational
wage issue.
if you look at what's happening, because it's only harming the economy to restrict the flow of immigrants from South America. It's going to raise the price of food. And most immigrants that work in this country don't reap any benefits from social programs in the United States, but they contribute.
They pay in?
They pay into it.
Yeah.
So all the rhetoric and the nonsense that's being fed to the American public about the harm of immigrants flooding the country, the purpose of that is to divide black and white and brown people, and to get them to fight against each other so that they don't fight against the real cause of their misery.
Yeah, it wasn't the Chinese or the Salvadorans or the whatever that all these U.S. jobs went overseas. It's because the U.S. corporate bosses decided we can make money if we relocate our factory over there. So it's not the immigrants who caused all these jobs to leave. It was the greedy corporations that said, we can make more money if we set up shop over in Bangladesh. And yet, here we are pointing the fingers at folks who are just, below the bottom rung, trying to escape violence and starvation and come here to make a better life like my ancestors did. And it doesn't make any sense. And you get this whole rhetorical thing, that the extreme conservatives talk about entitlements, and they talk about Social Security, and I think, no. Every month that I get my paycheck, Social Security was taken out of my paycheck.
And
That's those are my savings accounts. Those aren't entitlements.
Right. They are entitlements, but there's nothing wrong with they're
savings
entitled
accounts.
to it because
I earned it.
It's like when you pay an insurance policy.
Yeah.
You're entitled to see the return from that.
Right.
And so they've made entitlement into a dirty word.
Yeah.
And as if you feel entitled, to something that
Yes,
you don't deserve, but you do deserve it.
Well, that 1% doesn't deserve to rule over this country.
Right. They're
That
the
I
ones
know.
with the undeserved entitlements.
You try to convince them of that.
Oh, no.
Really. No, but it's up to the people. These things I believe that they can be changed. Not overnight, but it means that the people, the poor people, and this doesn't matter what color, if you're poor, hey, you're included, that they have to get together and recognize that if I help me, I help him. If he helps himself, he's helping me. That if we help
We have
one
to do it
another,
together.
we're all being helped. And that's the thing that has to be understood. It has to be understood, but they've done a very good job of separating them racial-wise. They've done an excellent job. Like here in North Carolina, they talk about, well, the Mexicans are taking our jobs. Mexicans aren't taking their jobs. They're doing the jobs that these others refuse to do, won't do.
You want to go out in the fields and pick cotton?
No.
Right.
Sugar, no.
Right.
But they're making this because if all of these people came together, hey, that would change the whole thing. And they don't want that to happen.
No.
They will do anything to keep that from happening.
But that's what the Poor People's Campaign is doing, is bringing it all together. And a little bit of history, the Poor People's Campaign was started by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1968, shortly before his assassination. And what's happening now, and it's been relatively dormant, it's never stopped existing. It was taken over by the Reverend Dr. Ralph Abernathy for a time, but then he died, and it went dormant. Shortly after King's assassination, there was the Resurrection City that was built on the in Washington D.C. It was a tent city. Hundreds of thousands of people lived through rain and storms and persisted, and it was a very dramatic demonstration. But when King died, that dream kind of went dormant. And now the Reverend William Barber II has taken the national reins of that organization again, and what's beginning to happen, the civil disobedience we're seeing all over the country, is what King envisioned. And so Reverend Barber is carrying out King's dream, and Reverend Barber and everybody in this room is carrying out that dream, and many hundreds of thousands of people are involved, and it is growing.
And I would say without the civil rights movement, this country would be completely morally bankrupt. I think that has renewed the heart of this country. It was the civil rights movement. And that, of course, is very much in danger right now. I think you have these so-called Christians, very conservative folks, who have no compassion in their hearts. They don't have love in their hearts. And they're using, passages from the Bible that other people use to condone slavery. They're using it against poor people and all of these things that are just horrific. And I think these folks really have something wrong with them. And if we as a nation are to survive, it's not just by the letter of the law. It is, what is the spirit of this nation? Are we a moral or are we an immoral society? And we are going more and more in the direction of immoral. At least our politicians and some of our corporate leaders are going toward the immoral. All about efficiency and tax breaks for the wealthy.
Many of the people who are of that mindset are also poor. They're not the 99%.
Right, they bought into their own oppression. That happens.
Well,
They
they've
watch
had the
Fox
wedge
News.
issues used on them
The
the
wedge
same
issues,
way.
yeah,
yes.
and Fox News is.
And I
And
really
information,
think that's important to remember.
Yes.
and information is so important, because that's it. How you feel and what you believe depends on the information that comes into your consciousness. And a lot of people watch Fox News and MSNBC and CBS and ABC.
They're just as bad in the other direction.
It's not really the other direction. It's just a shade of the same direction from where I can see.
And we're only getting half the views from them.
Right. And
Well, for instance.
so I feel like it's important. That's why Mountain Stream TV to me is so important, because we have to provide information through other avenues to people and make sure that they do get that information.
Well, speaking of misinformation, there's this perception that's been put out by the Trump administration and other white nationalists saying that, Trump has stopped all these, Hispanic folks from coming across the border. No, the number of immigrants coming from Mexico has been a net wash or decreased over the last 3
That's
years.
right.
Well, indeed, Obama was very, very heavy-handed on
That's true.
Well, he was
stopping immigration.
right, but he was deporting the folks who had real criminal issues.
Yes.
But our new administration, Trump,
But
is
at
now.
the border, he was stopping people.
But
tremendously.
there was less demand economically. More people from Mexico were going back to Mexico
Right. I'm just
than
saying Trump
coming.
is getting credit for a whole lot more than
Right.
he's
Well,
done.
he's always going to take credit for anything he can that he thinks is positive. That's just his personality. But no, I teach English as a second language. I work with little Hispanic kids whose parents are from Mexico, and I've got little kids scared to death that their mom or dad are going to be hauled away at any given moment, partially because our politicians in Raleigh, the Republicans, made sure that drivers from other countries cannot get a driver's license without a Social Security number. So they can't legally get a driver's license. Well, if they go to work, if they go to church, if they bring their kids to school, if they go to the grocery store, they can get pulled over any time in these so-called safety checks, which to me are just authoritarian road checks, to see your ID papers, please. ID papers. I feel like, again, Orwellian nightmare. We've got to see your ID papers or they get a $240 fine. Now, the county governments aren't complaining because they're getting this windfall of $240 a pop. Now, if you've got anything more than that, then they might deport you. So I've got a little girl in 3rd grade, and her dad got deported because they pulled him over for, I think, a bad tail light, and then found out that he was working at some point on false documents. But of course, yeah, I guess he used somebody else's or a defunct Social Security number or something, but he still had to pay into that person's Social Security account. He'll never get a dime of that, but he still had to pay into that and everything else. But because that's a felony or something, he got deported. Well, now, so the mom with the 3 daughters are here in this community. The daughters were all born here. They're American citizens. Dad gets deported to Mexico, and there's no work in Mexico for the most part. And there's terrible violence in parts of Mexico because of the drug cartels that are that's being fed by our addiction to illegal drugs, some of which, like marijuana, should be legal in a lot of cases. So you've got these drug cartels getting rich because of this prohibition, which shouldn't even exist. So it's all crazy. And the thing is, there used to be a program called Braceros in the 60s that Mexican workers get permission, come up to the U.S. and pick crops and such. And that still exists to a certain degree. But if you want to actually become a permanent citizen of the United States from Mexico, there's a quota. The quota according to the United States, if you come from Mexico, is very, very small. It takes about 10 to 15 years to even get considered to become legal in this country if you're from Mexico. And it's thousands of dollars and all this
3 to 5
paperwork.
more years before you become.
Yes, and so people, why don't they just become legal? And it's like, well, it takes 10 to 15 years and costs thousands and thousands of dollars. In the meantime, you're giving all of your family's information to the federal government under the current administration, might show up at your door and use that against you to haul you away. So, and so all of these people are living not even as second-class citizens. They're in fear for their livelihoods and for their children and their lives. And they're afraid to go to the police for fear if somebody victimizes them. So they don't want to go to the police because they might get deported.
Not to mention, I mean, those who are even left alone live in substandard housing provided very often by the agricultural company that employs them. It's atrocious. You know, shacks without plumbing sometimes.
I've got one near my
electricity.
house. Yeah. I've got one of those shack facilities near my house.
Yeah, well, that's here, but in California, like there are these massive farms and
Yes.
with these shacks on them that house that are crowded and just miserable living conditions, and they're paid less than minimum wage very often because they can't report to that they're getting, you know, they could give you getting paid $5 an hour or $3 an hour,
or not pay you at all.
well,
That happens, and they're
that may
afraid to
even
go to
happen
court.
too. There's legalized slavery going on, or illegalized slavery, but yeah, and all of this is, and that's the reason that food is relatively inexpensive in the United States. It takes advantage of that system.
Captive labor.
Yeah, captive, and now these people are being threatened further, you know, with jail time and separation from their children.
And the Republicans
It's horrible.
have the majority in Congress, in the House, and the Senate. They could pass something reasonable if they wanted to. They don't want to. They want some extreme things, and you know, President Trump promised. He said, "I'm, you know, the DACA deal. I'm going to sign it. No matter what, I'm going to sign it." And then he must have heard something on Fox News that he didn't like, so he didn't sign it. And so the whole thing went through.
They never
fell
passed
through.
it.
Right. Well, but he signaled that he wouldn't then sign it after he got more misinformation from
What the
Fox News.
Republicans are doing now is they're attaching the DACA bill to other legislation that they know the Democrats won't vote for. You know, so they're trying to combine it with other things, and then they say, "Oh, it's the Democrats' fault; they wouldn't vote for it."
Well, they're literally holding these 800,000 young
Right.
people hostage.
Yeah.
Holding them hostage.
And, well, and the
saying,
Democrats are going along.
We're going to deport these people. Well, the Democrats are a minority in the House and the Senate.
Right.
There's only so much they can do. They can't vote for anything all without the
No, but
Republicans.
they can filibuster so that legislation doesn't get passed, and they're not doing that. If the shoe was on the other foot, the Republicans would block it without blinking an eye. But the Democrats don't seem to have the wherewithal to unify and stand up against the most draconian things that are being passed.
Well, and to me, the two hearts of the matter that are killing our democracy, one is Citizens United, you might want to talk about, and the other one is the gerrymandering thing. Because whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever, the gerrymandering thing, basically, instead of politicians selecting, well, instead of the voters selecting their leaders, the politicians are selecting their voters. And why is that bad if you're, say, a Republican in this state? Well, why that's bad is, so they create so many very safe, conservative, red districts in this state that there typically hasn't been a real challenge from a Democrat. Okay, so what's the problem with that? Well, then the election is essentially decided in the primary, in the Republican primary. So let's talk about Mark Meadows. So if Mark Meadows goes out there and he wants to get reelected, well, he doesn't have to worry about a Democrat traditionally, in the way it's gerrymandered that they've broken up any kind of blue votes and condensed the red votes. But now
if somebody decides to run somebody against him in the Republican primary with a lot of money,
right? And so what happens is then in a red district, somebody might challenge Meadows from the right of Meadows, more extreme. And so what happens is the Republicans become more extreme, the ones who get to D.C., and then you have gerrymandering, Democratic gerrymandering in Maryland and other states, and then there, same thing on the opposite end, is they get the most extreme liberals, and when they get to D.C., we don't compromise, nothing gets passed. And so gerrymandering, I don't care, Republican, Democrat, green, yellow, blue, red, needs to be done. It needs to be nonpartisan redistricting so that each person has a fair say to elect leaders of their choosing. Anything less is anti-democratic and anti-American.
Well, you know, this is the thing. This is what the powers that be, the people who run the show, want. And you know, I keep hearing everybody talking about democracy. This is not. It was not meant, it wasn't created to be a democracy. This was a republic. It became a capitalist republic. Which says it became capitalist. But even when it was first created, this was the point, because if you didn't own property, you couldn't vote.
Well,
You
and
weren't
this
a man, you weren't white.
forget the women, they didn't forget it because they were property. But if you were a white male who own no property, you had no vote. This wasn't created, they didn't even name it as a democracy. It was named as a republic. This came on later, and it's not a democracy. And it really because in order to be a democracy, you have to look at the definition of the word. This is not going to happen here. I mean, that means everyone has an equal manner, has an equal right. It won't happen even in your lifetime.
Well, I hope you're wrong about that, but it's what we fight for. It's what
It's
we strive
something
for.
that takes so much because you first have to educate the people most affected before you can get them together to start the fight for it. That's the thing. And these guys up top have more ways of keeping you separated. It has worked so well.
And yet, against those same powers, women gained the right to vote. The abolitionist movement succeeded. Labor unions came into being. They were illegal at one time. So when people get together, they can overcome these powers, and that's what we have to keep in mind. Is that we can't give up. We have to organize, and we have to succeed and overcome all those obstacles, and we can.
I believe it can. I have to believe it can. Otherwise, I have to just sit back and be quiet.
Look at history, and you'll know that
You know,
we can.
it can be done, but I also know what it takes to get it done. I was part of a lot of what happened, and this was one of the unions. We helped to organize 1199, the Hospital Workers Union, and I know what this took. I was in part of it. And it really, I mean, this means you have to devote your whole being to this. It was important because hospital workers were they were just a little above domestic workers. And so you had to work hard. You had to put in time and energy, and you had to believe totally in this. This takes a whole lot.
But the ultimate,
But it was done.
battle,
But
that's right.
it was done because you had enough people who. But this is now attacking a whole system. You need a lot more people.
Well, think about the women's movement. When the women's movement began, there wasn't one woman in Congress. There wasn't one woman in any state legislature. There wasn't a woman governor. There wasn't a woman president. And yet, against that, they won.
Yes, the women had, they had secret power. I won't even go into that, but let's be realistic.
The power to withhold.
I mean, let's face it. They had to use methods that, pretty much unheard of, but they're there, and luckily these women knew.
But
what to do.
don't workers have that secret power too, in a different sense? They,
Some of them don't
if
know.
we go on strike, nobody has anything. And so we ultimately, working people hold the power if we can get
In Birmingham, it lasted for a year, over a year.
You mean the bus?
After
the
Rosa
boycott?
Parks,
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
up,
it took
and
a
they had
year
the
for the
boycott
bus
and it-
to
For the
work.
bus, yeah.
But
That wasn't the workers striking. That was the customers striking.
Right, right.
Well, that's
right.
another way we can
Yeah,
strike.
that's
Yeah.
true. We do hold the economic purse strings. We can decide what to spend our money on. You can vote with your wallet. And that's another power that people. And this is what Gandhi used to get rid of the British in India.
Yes.
Is the boycott. We're only going to buy homemade goods. We're
We
not.
tried that in New York. They wanted to get rid of the Daily News, which is a lousy right-wing paper. And they didn't do it, and you know why? And I talked around to my people, and their attitude was, oh well, I'm going to buy, and why this was an easy-to-read
Right.
paper, and it was that, and so it's still there. It's still
Although
there.
it has changed.
That's what a friend sent me an article from it, and I said, this is from the Daily News?
Right, yeah.
I'm amazed. But the point was, you couldn't seem to get the people to understand why.
And yet, the grape boycott worked.
which great boycott?
The grape boycott.
Oh, great. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
And the Montgomery, was it Montgomery or Birmingham? The bus boycott.
I
That
think it
Rosa
was-
Parks. Was that?
Was it? I don't.
But the other thing, you know, there's a lot of different types of power, but knowledge is power.
Knowledge.
And so yes, when you
Information is power.
exactly, so when you've got Rupert Murdoch controlling
Yeah.
all of the news outlets or a majority of news outlets in areas all around the
He hasn't
country.
made an offer to Mountain Stream TV yet.
Well, when you move up to a big high-rise, we'll know you've made it.
Yes.
But it's interesting. You can talk about Sinclair and all this other stuff, but it's interesting. We were talking about this on the way here from Franklin about, the white identity was created. In terms of, you had people from Lithuania and Poland and southern Italy and France and all these groups of people coming in here. They didn't see themselves particularly as white. They saw themselves as Polish or Lithuanian or whatever. But then as they lost their culture and became Americans, suddenly they're black and we're white, and that whole game, instead of we're all human beings. And from the moral perspective, we're all the same human family. And the powers that be have really done a job on us.
Oh, they've done a fantastic job.
And they're going to divide us by, skin color, nose, hair, religion, language, income, neighborhood, anything, everything. They're going to try and, slice us and dice us so we don't know anything. And I think of, Native American people and African American people who, by government decree, were forced to give up their language, their religion, their way of life, their support networks, everything. And then you wonder why, how come they're not doing so well? Well, because their whole support systems were ripped away from them.
The fabric of their lives.
Yeah,
Exactly.
how they supported each other and lines of communication and support and all sociological, emotional support, financial support, all that stuff was ripped away and forbidden. It was until the 1970s. It was the mid-1970s when finally there was a law enacted. Before that, it was illegal for Native Americans to worship in their traditional religions. That's a First Amendment right, but it didn't apply to them. It's insane how our laws are written by the powerful, those in charge. And so, yes, we need some real fundamental change, but it starts here. And then you've got to connect this to this. You've got to get knowledge. And then you've got to connect with people if you're going to move forward. Because right now, we're getting run over and people are dying. 500,000 people in North Carolina were eligible for the Medicaid expansion, and Republicans in Raleigh said, no, we don't want that money that we've already paid into our federal taxes. So how many people have died in North Carolina? How many hospitals have closed? Look at Franklin, our labor and delivery got closed. And it's just insane. A budget is a moral document, but in the hands of our Republican folks in Raleigh, it's an immoral document. It's reverse Robin Hood. It's taking money away and services away from the people who need it and giving to the people who don't need it and can't afford, and yes, people, these regressive taxes, they want more state taxes, sales taxes. Well, that hurts the poor people who are just trying to live on a little bit of money, and more of their money goes to taxes. Meanwhile, they get these big tax breaks if you have over $500,000.
Talking about taxes, the state taxes affected me. I wanted to leave and get back to New York City, only I couldn't afford the rent. I couldn't pay $2,000. But from $46 that I was paying here, what I got here,
In Texas.
yeah, in
North Carolina?
in state tax,
Yeah.
$46. When they changed that law, all of a sudden my state tax, I didn't get more from my pension or Social Security, was $200 and something dollars. I went crazy. I said, I mean, I went and I wrote
This
a
was
letter
the big
to the
Republicans' tax
Yeah.
cut.
This was the big thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote a letter because this to me was, how is this possible? I wasn't getting more money, and they said, well, number one, your pension, you're getting it from another state, and I said from $46 to 200. I'm trying to remember, 200 and some dollars. I didn't have that money to pay them. My daughter had to give me the money to pay that. Because if I hadn't paid it in time, I would have been, taxed more and more and more. She gave me the money for that. After that, I had to put aside money so that when the time came, I could pay it. But this for me was, as a New York State employee, I didn't pay New York State tax when I retired. But here, the $46, I said, fine, because I get refund from state. Hey, that's fine, that's no problem, I'm not going to complain. But from 46 to 200, this to me, I could not believe it. I was ready to leave immediately. I said, I can't afford to stay here. This is incredible. And then everybody, to get home, I didn't have much choice, which really made me really angry because I couldn't do anything about it. And then I thought about, they were telling me how this was affecting the parents here with children. They were no longer able to declare this, and
Or
they
income tax
yes, they weren't able to get income tax. And I said, oh my God, it's only affecting me individually because I don't have children, but the ones with children, this is a horror. And this man, when I met Davis at an affair,
Jim
he was
Davis,
Jim
Senator
Davis,
Davis, yeah.
and he went to shake my hand, and I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry, I don't shake hands with people like you. And I mean,
Did you tell him why?
I said to him, I said, the tax that you put through, the things that you're
Good.
putting through that are killing people here, I said, I don't want to shake your hand.
Right.
And he looked at me, and I walked away. I mean, because I couldn't have shaken him, because I might have been put in jail. I might have been arrested, because I might have tried to flip him. But I'm saying this to me, he just represented everything. If you believe in good and evil, he represented everything evil
Yeah.
to me. And when I thought about what he was doing to, never mind me, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I'm just one person I have to take care of. Of course, now with everything else going on here, I'm having difficulty with that because of medical addiction. Like networks, and they don't have a network in Franklin, so I have to pay for the rehab treatment that I needed to have. I had to stop because I couldn't pay it. So these are the other things. I said, I need to get back to New York City because I can have this, but I can't afford to live in New York City. And so I'm here. And I chose to remain here after a while because I think it's beautiful. And I remember saying to someone when I first got here, and I'm looking, and I said, how could so much hate exist in the midst of all this beauty? And the person I was talking to said, well, because the people who've grown up with this don't see it. And I said, yeah, but there's so much beauty. You have to feel love. And he said, no. And I have stayed here long enough. I've been here 11 years. And I have seen it. And I've come to understand some of it. And I still say, come on now. It's time to change this. It's time for people to get together. Why do you keep putting these people in office, a Davis in office? Look at what he's doing. But the people it's affecting most don't realize. They don't recognize
But Davis
it.
and that type of person, they've got this thing down pat. While yes, let's say I'm a white struggling working guy, whatever. While they're taken away from your bread basket, they're over saying, look, they might take away your guns. They're going to do this, and the gays, and the abortion, and da-da. So they're trying to distract us with these things over here, which they're not going to do anything about anyway. That's not going to change. Meanwhile, they're picking our pockets.
So I'm going to bring this back to the Poor People's Campaign again.
Well, all of this is part of that.
Oh, certainly
You
it
see?
is.
It's
Certainly.
all.
We have not really left that conversation. But Lucy, so this was the first time that you ever participated in civil disobedience? Yeah. you feel it was worthwhile and that it's something you would advise other people? Would you consider doing it again yourself?
Tell them what you said you felt.
What's that?
When you talked to us and said what you felt, what it did
Well,
for you.
I probably will not do it again for many very practical reasons that have to do with my family and my age. Although I'm not sure. It just depends. But what I got out of this was so personal that it's hard to say you should do it, because I think every person is individual. As an activist, what I told the people at our meeting earlier was that I've always felt unworthy to be thanked for anything I've done, because I just not feel like I've given anything or enough, maybe. And I think now that I have married my body with my energy and my time and my soul and my head, I feel not worthy, but I feel like something significant happened to me. It's very hard to put it into words, but I feel like I gained more than I gave in some wonderful intrinsic way. That's the funny thing I know to say. And I think it's up to the individual. I think it's very important, and I think that the movement needs people desperately to participate. And I think what we have learned from Dr. King, what we learned from Gandhi, what we've learned from our personal experience validifies what I'm saying. And I don't really, it hasn't been very long since it happened.
You're still
And
digesting it all.
I'm still absorbing, I'm still coming up with ideas and connections. I was thinking about something, and I don't think I'm ready to say this, but I'll give it a try. At some point, Dan, you mentioned the breaking up of families and the extended family and the cultural traditions, and something has happened in our culture in my lifetime where we don't really have extended families, or most of us don't have extended families. I mean, personally, our family is all over the country. And my husband and I are here in this little mountain enclave, and all of our children, it would take a great deal of effort to come and support us. And so we're all maybe ready to welcome ourselves into the human family. I know for years I've said to women, "You're my sister," because my sister's so far away. That's this sort of thing. So maybe either by the government's mandate, the early settlers of this country, or our own willingness to go search for the big job and the big money somewhere else, has made us more vulnerable to becoming a human family. That was a thought I had. And we certainly, whatever happens to the least able, the poorest person on this earth affects me. I do know that. I'm not okay as long as my brother and sister aren't okay, and that's so very clear. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody isn't free, nobody is free.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
I've come here to the South where I'd never been, and I've met, and I have to say this, I've said it to my friends back home, I've met some of the most beautiful people that I've ever known, and I've known some beautiful ones, but I really have people who seem to care. Someone like, and of course, Dan, this is my son. He doesn't know, but this is my son here. You know, this is it. And I've got a sister here who is, you know, and I
know
ended up...
her name.
Huh?
I know her name.
No, these are things that, and I've never been rich. I didn't grow up rich. We had pay. But the feeling, you know, they would say, okay, I'm not poor, I can't get food stamps or blah, 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 because I'm not poor enough. Hoo, hoo, hoo. But I was always taught, and I grew up, that man who's laying in the gutter, and didn't matter what color he was, is my brother. And if he's laying in the gutter, I'm not too far up. And if he is not able to smile, my smile has no meaning. And this is how my mother was. My father was a little bit more, but little different. But my mother, this is what I grew up with. And so when I see someone who is hungry or who is hurt, hey, I cannot be happy in this as long as there is some unhappy person who need not be unhappy. Some person who is hungry when there is no reason for anyone to be hungry. And this is how I feel. And it never mattered the color. This wasn't the thing that made the difference. It made the difference if there was somebody laying in the gutter. Hey, this is my brother down there. I have to try to pull him up. Because otherwise, I'm going to be there next to him. And this is what people don't seem to realize. Poor people are still people. And you don't know when that day might come for you. And therefore there's one that's lean on me, that says, because I might have a problem that you'll understand. This is saying it. We have to understand those who are going to work every day and have a job and they're able to feed their family. If that guy around the corner has to work 2 jobs and his wife has to work 2 jobs just to feed his family, hey, you can't go much further than he can. And if we can all understand that, Poor People's Campaign should be, this should be countrywide and everybody should be pouring whatever they have into it. Because, hey, it's true. No man is free until all are free.
And nobody's immune, in terms of healthcare coverage, there are young people who say, well, why should I have to pay into the healthcare system? I'm healthy, I don't have any problem. Well, what if you get into a car accident, or you have an accident of some kind, and suddenly you're dependent and unable to work.
And nobody's healthy forever. We're all going to need it.
We're all
When
going to
I
get old,
retired,
if God willing,
Right.
Right.
I was questioning, should I keep this insurance? Should I keep hold? And one of my friends on the job said, fine, you're in excellent health today. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. If you stay around, you're going to get older.
That's right.
And you get older, you're going to need. And I looked and said, me? But I kept it. I listened. I listened and I kept it. And I'm so glad because right now I have to take medication. And people who don't have the insurance are paying $100-some for what I'm paying $50 for. Hey, so I'm glad that I learned to listen and follow. And this is what, young people have to be made to understand. If you live long enough, you're going to need it. There's no 2 ways. I took good care of myself, but today I'm very glad that I kept it. I'm very glad that I have that.
Nobody's invulnerable.
No, indeed. No.
There's this African proverb I heard on NPR, because that's what happens on NPR. Anyway, it was from some village in Africa. I have no idea where. And it said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yes, that's your, yes, that's,
And
It's a good place to end.
So I'm going to try to wrap this up a little bit here. Where do we go from here?
Connection. The human connection. I think in some ways, like the Moral Mondays, there's another one coming up here in Franklin on September the 19th. 17th? 17th, Monday, whatever that is. But one of the most powerful things we have is our own story. Our own suffering, our own story. And some of those stories are going to be shared at that Mountain Moral Monday. And because we need to build
everyday life,
to
if
connect.
we walk across the gap and make friends and make brothers and sisters with people we know and meet in our everyday lives
Mm-hmm.
and make a strong human connection.
Yeah.
Some of these barriers that do exist between us and other
Mm.
people that we didn't create, but they're
Mm.
sort of there.
Mm.
They fall away, and that's the, and we do that by sharing our stories with each other.
That's it. I've got some neighbors who are very conservative, but we're still good neighbors, and we still do some stuff together. And it's like, oh, okay, we can, yeah. So.
In my community, one of the neighbors down the road had said, come at me very, angrily and everything. And one of the neighbors simply said, well, in this community, we all have looked after one another. Now, I'm the only black person in that whole community. She said, we all look after one another. And that's all she was doing. And this is what we do. And I thought this was beautiful. This was beautiful. And this is the way we have to think.
So if people are watching this on their computer screens and they want to know how they can get involved in the Poor People's Campaign, what do they do?
I would say Google it, and they will. Their invitation will be very prominent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you live in Western North Carolina, you can get involved in the Jackson County branch of the NAACP.
Yeah.
Which is interestingly enough, most of the Western North Carolina mountain branches are majority white. And I've had people ask me, why am I a white person? Why am I involved in the NAACP? And I said, what I've said before, the same things that help poor black folks and other folks, help poor white folks. And I don't know of another advocacy group where I am living that's saying, look, we need to work together and help each other. That message sometimes comes from a church, but it's usually just within that church. No, we need to get outside of that and reach out to everybody.
Okay. And that's what we're doing here. We are reaching out to you. If you're watching this, and I want to thank our guests, Lucy, Selma, Dan. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you are doing, for taking risks you've taken, for your dedication and the work you're doing. And let's keep it together and continue to work together and reaching out to more people.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for making this venue available.
Thank
for
you
all of
very
us.
much for doing this. This is marvelous. This is part of what's needed.
And your Canary Coalition work and your
Oh,
NAACP work and all the
Yes.
things you've been doing.
And thank you all for watching, and we'll continue to cover the Poor People's Campaign on News from the Roots and on Mountain Stream TV, and get involved.
Reach out.